أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون في بضع سنين لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعد ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون بنصر الله ينصر من يشاء وهو العزيز الرحيم وعد الله لا يخلف الله وعده ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا وهم عن الآخرة هم غافلون أولم يتفكروا في أنفسهم ما خلق الله السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إلا بالحق وأجل مسمى وإن كثيرا من الناس بلقاء ربهم لكافرون أولم يسيروا في الأرض فينظروا كيف كان عاقبة الذين من قبلهم كانوا أشد منهم قوة وآثاروا الأرض وعمروها أكثر مما عمروها وجاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات فما كان الله ليظلمهم ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء أن كذبوا بآيات الله وكانوا بها يستهزئون الله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ثم إليه ترجعون ويوم تقوم الساعة يبلس المجرمون ولم يكن لهم من شركائهم شفعاء وكانوا بشركائهم كافرين ويوم تقوم الساعة يومئذ يتفرقون فأما الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فهم في روضة يحبرون وأما الذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا ولقاء فأولئك في العذاب محضرون فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Jazakumullah khair, Brother Al-Yamin. Thank you for the beautiful recitation. As always, and it's a night of the 25th of Ramadan, and we've been, many days and being blessed by Shaykh's beautiful speeches, the ashab, the stories of the Sahaba, as well as the lessons learned from them. Inshallah, we'll have another night like the nights before, and continue to be guided and grow closer to Allah through the speech by Shaykh Rizwan Arastu. Salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه وأعد لهم جنات تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك الفوز العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد We have been discussing different companions of the Ma'sumeen over these nights that we've been together. And the idea is to honor this verse that is praising these companions, the first ones to believe in Rasulullah amongst the Muhajirin and the Ansar, and those who follow in their footsteps. And we also hope to be able to follow in their footsteps. We should be the tabi'een of the earlier companions, that we also behave with and believe in and support our ma'soom the way they were able to. So we're looking at different stories and learning some about history, where these particular individuals fit into the history of the imams and the goings on, the politics and the wars and all these different things, trying to see how they served their ma'soom. The companion I want to look at today is a companion of the 7th and the 8th Imams. His name is Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa. Al-Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa. So he is a Kufan, and he was one of the companions, like I mentioned, of the 7th and the 8th Imams. And the laqab washa, this is something we see on many of the companions of the imams. So this is also, I think, just the name itself is a lesson. So washa is a kind, it means that he's either like a printer of fabric, so like block printing or some sort of printing that happens on fabric. So either he does the printing itself or he sells that fabric which is printed. And we see this khazaz and bazzaz and Tammar and Jammal. All these are different kinds of occupations that these people filled. And so that itself is something interesting, or Zayyat, Bayya' al-Saburi. So like all these different people, they had these different occupations. So the companions of the Imams oftentimes either, of course, to fund themselves and make their own livelihood, they would have to work. And then also this would become cover for their activities in support of the Imams. So some, for instance, like a Zayyat, one who was selling oil, would sell in these containers or leather containers or whatever the container, or maybe pottery. And then he would use that, he would have a shipment of his oil, but then some of those containers would contain money or gold and silver that he was sending here and there to convey the khums to the Imam, or on behalf of the Imam sending money to somebody who needed it. So they were able to use their business then both as a source of income, then a source of charity and building infrastructure for the Imams. And then they were able to use that as cover for some of the activities that they had to fulfill under this very severe taqiyya that they were living in. So Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa, the story I want to share with you is this. He was, think of like an older generation of alim. He's from the 7th and 8th Imam's time. So he lives up to his old age, and he overlaps with another companion who was a very important companion. His name is mouthful, Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa al-Qummi. Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa al-Qummi. So he is a companion of the latter Imams from the, if I'm not mistaken, from the 9th and the 10th and the 11th Imams. He's a companion of those. So we have an older companion who's overlapping with this later companion, and they intersect with each other. So Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa, let me tell you a little bit about him. He is known as the lead scholar, the head scholar of Qum. So in a time when scholarship is, one of the centers of scholarship is Qum, this Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa is the leader of all of the Qummi scholars. And he himself, his family is very prominent. All of his relatives, all of his ancestors, they are all companions of their respective imams. They were important scholars, narrators of traditions. And so this Ahmad ibn Muhammad Isa, as a younger man, comes to Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa, and he travels all the way from Qum to Kufa, and he tells him that he's come to seek some ahadith out. So he tells him, can you please find for me your notebooks that contain the ahadith of Ala ibn Razin and Aban ibn Uthman al-Ahmar, so two other prominent companions from the 6th Imam's time. If you could bring those notebooks out, I'm looking for some ahadith. I want to transmit these books from you. So he goes and he finds those books and he presents them to him. And Ahmed bin Muhammad bin Isa, he says, please give me ijazah right away so that I can, on your authority, I can narrate these books. And Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa, he says, why the rush? Take the books, copy them at your leisure, and then come back and I'll give you ijazah, no problem. He's older, kind of more laid back. The younger student is in a rush, and he says, I don't have confidence in my life. I don't know if I'll live long enough to get your ijazah. I want to have the ijazah as soon as I can, so that I can, on your authority, I can transmit these traditions. So he does. He gives that ijazah, and then he takes the books, copies them down, and is able to go forward. The thing I want to point out for you and kind of fill in for you to give you some context for this is that nowadays, how do we get knowledge? Right, if you want to learn something, right now typically we go to the internet and do a search. Maybe if we go to the library, still we'll probably use search mechanisms, search engines, or ask the librarian, can you find something for me, and they'll find it. But it's a relatively easy process for us to find information. We have these supercomputers in our palms, our phones, that can connect us instantly to all the information that we need. But one of the problems that we face is authenticity. Right? Your kids are very much attuned to this, and they have, they go through some sort of some sort of training or admonishment at school as well, that when you research on the internet, you have to be careful for this or that, and how do you know if it's authentic information or it's a scam and someone's duping you. So trying to figure out how to, accessing information is very easy, but how do you authenticate information? How can you be sure that this is actually true? Or for instance, even if you get access to a particular book, which is a digital book, now how do you know this is actually the right digital book? It hasn't been adulterated. Someone hasn't changed it or deleted something or changed something, or it's not under a false name. So it's very hard in this internet age to be able to verify information. Finding it, getting access to it is easy. You do some searches and you get everything possible. Do a YouTube search, you can find everything possible. But how do you know that anything's real? That's a huge challenge. Another part of that is, I don't know how it is in your community, but in some communities, people are very quick to forward things. So we have, WhatsApp groups and whatever the latest, a platform is for internal communications. And, somebody receives a hadith or receives some sort of, a'mal, and immediately they forward it to everyone. And now you have, a hadith being blasted at you, and you have no idea, where is this from? It has a chain of transmission. It says it's from this book or that book, and it has all these words on it, but you don't have access to that book or to know, where is it from? Is it an authentic hadith? What do our scholars say about it? How do they rank it in terms of its correctness and authenticity? How do they interpret it? Has it been a source of controversy for scholars themselves? They've debated whether it's true or false. None of that is there. It's just one hadith is blasted at you, and now you either do what I do and just ignore that and get out of every group like that and never pay attention to anything that's forwarded to you, which makes you very safe. If you just immune yourself and close yourself off to all these kinds of forwards. Or if you make the mistake of opening it and reading it, then you get sucked into a black hole of questionable information that's constantly being thrown at you. The authentication of information has always been a challenge. Now it's just a bigger challenge, and because the access to information is so great, it becomes an even bigger challenge. But this is what the companions of the Imams dealt with through a very specific set of protocols. Right? If I had contact with the Ma'soom or with a companion of the Ma'soom, so I had information, and you wanted to get that information from me, you wouldn't just casually ask me, or you wouldn't listen to a speech and say, Shaykh so-and-so said this on authority of so-and-so, and I heard it, and that's it. It wouldn't be based on rumors and just passing out information orally. To do it properly, what they would do is they would have to get ijazah from the person who's the intermediary, that source of information, to be able to transmit that information. So they would first make sure that there are many steps. One is to authenticate the person, right? We have the verse in Quran, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ, and the fifth Imam famously says that when Allah is saying you should look and examine where your food comes from, what He means is فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ عِلْمِهِ عَمَّنْ يَأْخُذُهُ. That's one of the butun, one of the hidden meanings of that verse. Of course, it's talking about food, and look at the where your food comes from, and the fact that it comes from Allah, who is your Rabb and who's managing all your affairs for you. That's the meaning of the verse. But he says there's a batin meaning, a hidden meaning of the verse, which is referring to the food of the soul, which is knowledge. Examine knowledge that you receive and see who are you getting it from. So don't just say, the information seems good, I'll take it. You need to see who's teaching it, who's the source of that information. That is also important. So that's one of the verification steps, is to see who is the person narrating it. Does he have a good reputation? Is he trustworthy? Does he really, has he really studied with and gotten his information from the person he claims he's gotten it from? What's his character like? Do people, trust him as a source of information? So once you've verified that, now you have to look at the information that he's conveying to you. So there are basically, three good methods, we could say 4 methods of receiving information from somebody. Let's say 3 at first, then I'll add the 4th one later. So 3 ways. One would be sama'. Sama' is that you listen. So for instance, some of these transmitters of hadith, they would have their books. And they would sit in the masjid, for instance, and all the transmitters from the town, all the students who were there, they would come and they knew who this was, that this was so-and-so, he's gray-haired, he studied with this imam and with this companion, and now he's here in town, so they would come and they would listen. And he would open up his book of hadith and say that, so-and-so transmits from Imam Baqir, and so-and-so transmits from him, and then this is what he said. And he reads one hadith and everyone listens, and in those sessions, they would either start writing. So I would dictate and you would write. And then once you had all written, I would take a look at what you had written, and I would sign off and say, yes, you've accurately copied what I've transmitted for you. And so then I give ijazah to you that you can take this forward and transmit it to other people. And then you become one of the people in the chain of transmission between those students of yours and the imam. So they transmit from you, you transmit it from me, I transmit it from so-and-so, and then it goes back all the way to the imam. So as-sama' was one of those ways. You hear it from me, and then that gives you permission to then accurately and authentically transmit that information on. Another method was called al-qira'a ala shaykh. So instead of me reading to you, I could also just give you the book and say, you read it for me. Right? So then you would read through and I would listen and I would approve that, yes, you've read it correctly, you've understood it correctly. Now this may not seem so significant, but think about a time when writing was not so clear. Now all the letters we take for granted in the Quran, the Quranic letters were there, but writing was not at the level that it is now. And so it was important for you to be able to read my handwriting. Right? We're not talking about a printed book where it's all uniform, the same font. It's my particular handwriting, and maybe I have some sort of idiosyncrasy in my handwriting. I write certain letters in certain ways. And you need to become accustomed to my writing before you can trust yourself to copy down what you're seeing in my book. Otherwise, if you just copy and you misread something, you'll miswrite it, and then there'll be the first level error in your edition of my book. So I'd have you read it. Now, not always all of it. Sometimes we have an ahadith where people would say, is it okay if I just have them read the beginning of it, the end of it, the middle of it? And the Imam would say, that's fine. So at some point it became a little bit of a formality, but there was some benefit as well in what I just said, that you become familiar with my handwriting, that you be able to write down, and you'll be able to read it to me, and I say, yes, that is what I wrote down, and then you go and copy that and write it yourself. So this is called qira'a ala shaykh, that you're reading it as a student for the person who's going to transmit that to you. Another way is called munawala, and that would just be that I give you the book and say, you go copy it. So neither do I dictate it for you, nor do you read it for me, but I just give you the book and I say, take a couple of days, copy it down, and then bring it back to me. Now that's a little bit weaker connection, because there's not that personal connection of me actually reading it and you listening, or you reading it and me approving it. You're just looking at the book. So all that, the problem of mistaking the handwriting, misreading something, skipping something, not knowing the context, all that's there. But at least you have the book from me, hand to hand. I've given it to you, and I've given you permission that I want you to copy it down, and then you have my permission to go ahead and pass it forward to other people. Yeah. So these are the three kind of proper ways of passing on information. One other way, which is something more like what we have nowadays, is called wijada. Wijada is you just find a book. You go into the library and you find a manuscript, and it says it's from Shaykh Rizwan, but you don't know for sure. It could be, maybe not be, and then you have to do a little bit of homework. You have to maybe look at the handwriting, see does it match other evidence of handwriting that you have from me. Can you ask someone about it? And you have to do a little bit more work to establish this authenticity. But that was also something that happened later on. People would find a book, especially someone would die, and his estate, in his estate there would be books, and he didn't formally give permission to someone to copy those books. But I went to the estate sale, for instance, I bought the book, or somehow the book came into my hand. Now, do I have the authority to transmit that book and pass it forward, or no? So this is called wijada, and the Imams would say that if the book is, if it has content that is verified as similar to other things, if the person was trustworthy, they gave certain parameters and said, if that's the case, then you can go ahead and transmit this book, even through wijada. Now, what does this mean for us? First of all, just appreciate the system. These ulama in the early generations, they went through so much trouble to collect and collate and receive this knowledge. And we have it so easy. And literally we have everything that's been written at our fingertips through an internet search. Or at most through interlibrary alone. There's maybe a few steps, but very easy steps. You don't really have to go anywhere. Even if there's a physical copy of a book that's in another library somewhere in the world, and you want it, you don't even have to travel. You don't even have to buy the book. You can simply, there's systems in place where you can do interlibrary loan, tell your local library, I want this book, and within a certain amount of time, they'll bring it for you. It's so simple. These people had to travel literally across the world just to find one hadith. They might have heard rumors about it, that there is this hadith, somebody's, and they heard about it, but they have to verify it. They can't just go on based on rumor that I heard someone say something, the gist of it was this. They find out, who has this hadith? Who actually has it, with the chain of transmission authentically from the Imam? And they find out that, someone in Kufa has it. And so they drop everything, they travel from Qom to Kufa, a few days or weeks of travel, with all the hardship of travel in those days, just to go and meet that one person who has this hadith authentically from the Imam, and then get authority from him to transmit that hadith. That is what Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa is doing in this hadith. He is traveling from Qom as a young, up-and-coming scholar from a prominent family of scholars, and he's trying to recover this hadith from one of its sources, which is Hassan ibn Ali al-Washa in Kufa. So he has to go there, and then you see even the elder companion Washa says, what's your ajala? Why are you rushing? And you see Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa's groundedness. He doesn't say, I'm young, I have a whole life ahead of me, I have plenty of time. I'll take my time, I'll take the book, I'll copy it down, and then spend some days here. He says, I need the ijazah first. Let's go ahead and do the formal ijaza. You read it to me, I'll read it to you, whichever way you want to do it. But give me the ijaza first, and then I'll take care of copying it down. But he wants that connection of the authority first to be able to then pass it on. And he feels like his mortality is too risky. I could die before I get the ijaza. Who knows if I'll survive the night? Let me go get the ijaza first, so that at least this becomes part of my knowledge, and then other people can transmit it from me, so the knowledge can continue in case I die before we have the time to fully copy the book down and do it the proper way. So that, I think, is something amazing and beautiful for us to appreciate from their times, and then question ourselves and say, what's our position with knowledge? Let me tell you a little bit of an extension of the story. So let's go forward now. This Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa, the younger one who came from Qom to Kufa, now go fast forward a couple of, maybe decades. He now becomes, like I mentioned, Ra'isul Qom. He's the main scholar of Qom. Everyone looks up to him as the authority, and he has, political power, scholarly power, and everyone looks up to him. There is another scholar from an outskirt of Qom with a similar name. His Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Khalid al-Barqi. So it was Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Isa, this is Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Khalid. Right? And if the name, I don't know if they seem familiar at all, but these two are actually, if you look at Al-Kafi, right, many of the ahadith, maybe even most of the ahadith of Al-Kafi, he'll say, Al-Kulaini transmits from a group of scholars from Ahmad bin Muhammad ibn Isa, or from a group of scholars from Ahmad bin Muhammad ibn al-Barqi. So these two are the teachers of the teachers of Kulaini. But they didn't always see eye to eye, and that's the story I want to tell you. So Ahmad ibn Isa, let's say Ibn Isa and Ibn Khalid, just to separate them. So Ibn Isa, who's the head of Qom, he gets word that this Barqi is transmitting ahadith from weak individuals. And he's transmitting ahadith that are what's called mursal. Mursal means he's not mentioning all the links between himself and the ma'soom. He's just skipping and quoting from the ma'soom. Like if I say, Rasulullah said, Imam Sadiq said, you don't know, I'm skipping, I'm not saying, from whom, on whose authority am I quoting it to. That's usually how we quote nowadays. This did not go back then. You needed to mention what your link was, what your connection was to the ma'soom before anyone could trust that what you're saying is actually from the ma'soom. Now, in the age of print, it's become a little easier for us. We have Al-Kafi, we have Wasa'id al-Shia, we have these books that have been printed, and they've been printed in a very solid way, known way. Our scholars have kind of overseen that whole process, and they have verified that this book that's being printed is the exact same book that we have manuscripts of going all the way back to the compilers of the same works. So now the printed version of Al-Kafi, if I have it on my bookshelf, I can directly quote from that. I don't have to go back and mention all the people between me and Kulaini. I have the book itself, and the book is authenticated. I can transmit directly from that book and say, look, Kulaini tells me that Imam Sadiq said such and such. So again, we have it really easy compared to these people in the past generations. So Ibn Isa says that this Barqi is quoting from weak individuals and from people who transmit things without mentioning their intermediaries. And so for this reason, he literally kicks Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Khalid al-Barqi out of Qom. He banishes him from Qom. Just because of this one thing. Now, it wasn't that he's a liar. It wasn't that he is quoting false hadith. The claim, the indictment of him was you're transmitting ahadith, which are fine, but the ahadith are being transmitted from people who themselves are weak. So let me just tell you this as well. Sometimes we live among Sunnis, and sometimes we get kind of wind of the Sunni idea of ahadith being sahih or being da'if, kind of authentic or weak. In the Shi'i tradition, this is not such a big thing. Right? We don't have kind of a mathematical calculation of whether something's authentic or weak. Our scholars have a much more robust way of looking at ahadith, partly looking at the content, partly looking at other contexts, other ahadith that corroborate and so forth. But they have a very robust way of looking at a hadith and evaluating it and saying, I can rely on this hadith. I trust this hadith as being from the Ma'soom based on all these different calculations. It's not simply looking at the chain of transmission and saying that in this 6-person chain of transmission, one person is an unknown person, therefore throw the whole hadith out. It's all weak. They don't just throw it out if it's weak. Because just because that person is unknown doesn't mean he's a liar. Even if he's known to be a liar, doesn't mean this hadith is a lie. It's possible that the content of the tradition is true, even though one of the transmitters that's in the chain is a liar or unreliable. Or he might be unknown just because we don't know him. Doesn't mean he was definitely wrong or definitely a bad person. Right? So because of those possibilities, they've come up with other ways to also evaluate the hadith and not so simplistically say if it's one person's weak, then we throw the whole thing out and disregard that hadith. So sometimes you'll have Salafi types or Wahhabi types who will come and critique, they want to debunk Shi'ism, and they'll say this Al-Kafi of Shaykh al-Kunaini, it has 16,000 hadith, and they'll say, for instance, 9,000 of them are weak according to the Shia themselves, the Shia ulama themselves. And that's true. But what they're not telling you is that's not important for us. You're saying it's weak based on your calculations of, exactly who are the chains of transmitters, and if there's one person who's unknown or one person who's weak and makes the hadith weak by one calculation, you discard it. Our ulama don't discard it so easily, because this hadith could be the hadith of a ma'soom. Just because that chain of transmission is not a solid chain of transmission doesn't mean that the content of the hadith is a lie. And for me to disregard and literally throw against the wall a hadith that actually was from the Ma'soom is a huge affront to the Ma'soom himself. I should work a lot harder, I should do a lot more work to try to verify whether or not this hadith could plausibly be from the Ma'soom, and what could it possibly mean if the Ma'soom said it. What does it mean that's in line with everything else I know from the Ma'soom and everything else I know from the Quran? Right? So yes, it's true that much of Al-Kafi is weak by that very superficial calculation. 9,000 out of the 16,000 or so hadith that are in Al-Kafi. For instance, Alam Majlisi, he evaluates each hadith in his Mira'atul Uqul, and he's called weak by that calculation. But he calls it weak, and then you see he has a 10-page commentary on that hadith, trying to understand what does the hadith mean, and what is its ramifications, and what do we learn from the hadith. When he says it's weak, he's not saying it's weak, therefore we disregard it. He's saying it's weak by one calculation, but the hadith still has meaning for us, and if it's true, then this is what it means, and this is how it fits into our larger understanding of our Islamic learning. And sometimes you'll have a similar hadith. Sometimes people complain, you look at Al-Kafi, why is the same hadith repeated 4 times? This is boring, this is tedious, why can't we just clean it up and just have it one time? Well, one of the reasons why someone like Shaykh al-Kunaini would narrate things multiple times is because he has access to many more hadith. Like Al-Kafi is basically a condensation, an abridgment of the hadith he had access to. 16,000 in 8 volumes or 15 volumes, the latest edition. This is just a condensation, this is an abridged version of the ahadith he had access to. He was taking all these ahadith, sorting through them, vetting them based on his own standards, organizing them, and then presenting them to us in this book. And so what happens sometimes is you have a similar hadith and you have one solid chain of transmission, but maybe the text is not so good. Grammatically there's some problem, there's a word missing, it's a little confusing, but you have a solid chain of transmission to the gist of the hadith, and then you have another version of the hadith where the text is very good but the chain of transmission is weak. And so he'll quote both, he'll put both in his Al-Kafi. So now, with the combination of the two, now we have not only a good solid chain of transmission to the hadith, but we know we have a good version of the hadith, which is very clear and grammatically correct, and there are no problems and things like that. So it gives us more confidence, because we have several versions of it, it gives us more confidence that this was actually spoken by the Imam, and now we have a good idea of what he was actually saying, because it's quoted well in at least one of those versions of the hadith. All right, so it's a lot of technical stuff, but the gist I want you to take away from, just appreciate the lengths and the effort that these ulama went through to get this knowledge for us. Traveling across the world, compiling, writing, memorizing, transmitting, repeating, dictating over and over again, vetting, organizing. And this is all done in a time before all the conveniences that we have. Some of these individuals have such encyclopedic memories. I'm so amazed. Like Sayyid al-Khu'i was just before the computer age. And he has this Mu'jam Rijal al-Hadith, 6 volumes, something like that. He was able to, sort through all the Rijal, all these individual people who are in the chains of transmission, collect them all, sort them. This individual, he's mentioned by these 10 different aliases and these different sources and this many times and this, and just the statistics and the numbers and things that he was able to collate together in a pre-internet age is just mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. Some of you had you were doing his taqleed probably in the earlier parts of your life. Unfortunately, he passed away before I started doing taqleed and before I came into taqleed. But I benefited from his students and I'm his great-grand student. Right? Because my teachers all studied with Shaykh Jawad Tabrizi, who was one of the best students of Sayyid al-Khu'i. So through that chain, then I have some legacy from Sayyid al-Khu'i, for instance. Very tenuous, but it's a pride for me to have even that little very thin and very fragile kind of a chain to someone like him. So this is something that we have to appreciate, and then turn it on ourselves. So let me just finish up the story. So Ibn Isa kicks out al-Barqi because he didn't live up to this high standard that he had, and this became a big controversy. Here you're banishing someone from Qom, and there was some pushback. Finally, Ibn Isa realized that he's made a terrible mistake. And this is also a testament partly to his piety and his humility, being at his high station, seeing that he made a mistake by banishing this person and seeing that he was wrong in making that evaluation, that actually this person is a very valuable asset to our community and he himself is very reliable and very trustworthy and full of knowledge and he's done great work. Just because he's transmitting from some people who you don't think are reliable doesn't impute him himself. So once he made this correction in his own understanding, he invited him back, sought forgiveness very, very sincerely. And then actually al-Barqi dies before Ibn Isa. And so Ibn Isa goes in his janazah and he goes in the most humble way. So in that culture, it was improper for a respectable person to go out without, especially an alim, to go out without the imama, without proper regalia, without shoes. And he does all that. He takes his imama off, he takes his shoes off, he takes his aba off, and he walks in the street behind the janazah of al-Barqi, begging Allah for forgiveness, and he wants everyone to know that I'm leading this janazah, I'm going to pray over his body, ask Allah's forgiveness for him and all of this, that whatever mistakes I made, I'm hoping that Allah will forgive me for the mistake that I made in banishing this person and calling question to his reputation. So that also is something to admire in one of these ulama, that he had that kind of humility to correct himself and then publicly make it known that he was wrong in his previous actions and he seeks forgiveness for that. The lesson for us from all of this is, what are we doing? When we have such easy access to knowledge, why are we so steeped in ignorance? We have access to Quran, and many of us don't read Quran regularly. Or if we read it in Arabic, but we don't bother reading a translation. Or if we read the translation and we don't bother reflecting on it or reading a commentary. Or if we're doing all that, we don't bother discussing it. Discussion is one of the really important steps of learning, without which you can't really trust your learning. Just being in a silo and reading and studying is not good enough until you start discussing it, until you start presenting to someone else who has the ability to understand and then even critique or push back. That's when your knowledge becomes solid. Both solid in your own understanding and also refined. So simple discussions in our families, and I heard there's a halqa that happens here So those kinds of things are excellent. But how well attended are they? In a community of a few hundred, do hundreds of people come to a halqa like that and discuss Quran, or is it 2 or 3 people who come? So that's Quran. That's a very clear source of our knowledge. And if we're not making these very concerted efforts on a personal level, on a family level, on a communal level to engage with Quran, then what excuse do we have? And then ahadith. You don't have all ahadith at your disposal. You may not know Arabic, but you have access through translation. You have Nahj al-Balagha, which is a very well attested book that collects ahadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Translated into English, translated into some of the other languages with some commentary also available in English. You have Al-Kafi now through translation. Right? So you have access to some of these books. And if you're not making some fraction of the effort that the compilers of those books and the scholars that contribute to those books put into the making of the books, then what excuse do we have before Allah? One of the problems I think that we have as Shia is we feel like it's an all or nothing proposition when it comes to learning about Islam. Either you're a scholar and you devote your entire life and your career to learning and reading and writing and teaching, or you don't have to do anything. You're off the hook. And that is definitely not the case. That is a completely wrong understanding of what it means to be a scholar, first of all, and every single individual's personal responsibility to seek knowledge. And the first hadith that Shaykh al-Kulaini quotes in Kitab Fadl al-Ilm is طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim. In some versions, عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ وَمُسْلِمَةٍ. Seeking knowledge is incumbent, is a duty for every single individual Muslim. It's not a fard kifaya that as long as we have a person, a scholar who knows what he's talking about, then the rest of us are off the hook. We can just say, I don't know the answer, just ask him. I'm not sure what to do here, just ask him. That's not good enough. In our grave before Allah, we can't pass the buck and say, I have no idea what I believed, just ask him. I don't know why I believe this, ask him. That's not good enough. That's in terms of judgment, that should be a big wake-up call. Even in terms of the dunya, it's not good enough. When your kids ask you a question, when a non-Shi'i, a non-Muslim asks you a question, especially a basic question, a fundamental question about your beliefs or your basic practices, if you have to say, I don't know why we believe this. I'm not sure why we do this. That's what I was told. That's how I was taught. I do the same thing. How compelling a reason is that for this outsider or this child? If that's your answer, that I don't really know, ask him. This is what my parents taught me. This is what the Shaykh taught me. Right? If you want a compelling answer for your child doesn't have deference to authority the way you might. They have to be trained in that. It has to be like that deference, that acceptance of authority has to be earned. And it's only going to be earned if they can see that the authority is worth deferring to. And once they see that you actually have some understanding of why you do things, you know what your beliefs are, and you know why you believe them. You know what